Imagine a solid block of concrete, wire, and humanity, measuring roughly 200 by 100 meters, rising 14 stories into the humid air of Hong Kong. From the outside, it didn't look like a collection of buildings. It looked like a single monolithic organism, a parasitic growth that had swallowed the earth. This was Kowloon Walled City, often called the City of Darkness, Hak Nam. Until its demolition in 1993, it was the most densely populated place on Earth, with 50,000 people crammed into a space the size of a few soccer fields. That's a population density of approximately 1.9 million people per square kilometer, a figure so astronomically high it breaks the models of modern urban planning. Planes landing at the nearby Kai Tak airport would skim just meters above its roof, the landing gear almost tangling in the forest of television antennas. To enter the walled city was to leave the regulated world behind. Sunlight didn't reach the ground floor. The alleyways were lit by fluorescent tubes 24 hours a day, water dripped constantly from a ceiling of tangled pipes, and the air was thick with the smell of charcoal, opium, and fish balls. It was a cyberpunk dystopia brought to life, not by a master architect, but by the desperate, organic force of survival. It was a place where no laws applied, a vanished grandeur of anarchy that proved humans can adapt to absolutely anything.
How could such a place exist in a modern colonial city like Hong Kong? The answer lies in a bizarre diplomatic loophole. Originally a Chinese military fort, the site became a political no-man's land after the British leased the new territories in 1898. A clause in the treaty allowed Chinese officials to remain in the fort, but when the Qing dynasty fell in 1912, the fort was abandoned. The British claimed jurisdiction but rarely enforced it. The Chinese claimed sovereignty but couldn't exercise it. Into this vacuum rushed squatters, refugees from the Chinese Civil War, triad gangsters, and unlicensed dentists. It became a three-no zone: no British laws, no Chinese laws, and no Hong Kong police. This political prescription created a petri dish for a unique architectural experiment. Without building codes, zoning laws, or taxes, the city grew vertically, building upon building, stealing electricity from the grid and digging its own wells. It was the ultimate libertarian city, a monument to unregulated chaos that was eventually forbidden, not because it failed to function, but because it was an embarrassment to two governments who finally decided to clean up the diplomatic anomaly.
Welcome back to Vanished Grandeur, where we explore the structures that defied convention and were erased from the map. Kowloon Walled City is unique in our series because it had zero architects. No blueprints were ever drawn. No engineer signed off on the load-bearing walls. It was vernacular architecture on steroids. When a family needed more space, they simply built a room on top of their roof or their neighbor's roof. Buildings merged into one another. Staircases vanished into walls. Corridors turned into dead ends or led into someone's living room. The structural integrity of the city relied on the friction between buildings. They essentially leaned on each other for support. If you removed one building, the whole block might have collapsed. This was organic urbanism, growing like a coral reef. It challenged every Western notion of privacy, sanitation, and safety, yet it functioned. It had its own economy, its own hierarchy, and its own desperate beauty. Its destruction was the loss of a singular architectural species that will likely never evolve again.
To navigate the walled city, you had to learn its three-dimensional geography. There were only 4 water standpipes for the entire population of 33,000 to 50,000 people, all located on the ground floor. This meant water had to be pumped or carried up through the labyrinth. The streets were merely corridors, often only 1 or 2 meters wide, earning them the nickname the Street of the Seven Dragons, because you had to twist like a dragon to get through. Above your head, a chaotic web of electrical cables and water pipes formed a dripping ceiling, shielding you from the sky, but trapping the humidity and the noise. The city was a sensory pressure cooker. The constant roar of the factories, the shouting of hawkers, the mahjong tiles clattering, and the screaming of jets overhead created a wall of sound. This architectural compression forced a level of social intimacy that is incomprehensible to anyone living in a modern suburb. You didn't just know your neighbors, you could hear them breathing through the plywood walls.
The walled city was not just a slum, it was a hyper-productive economic engine. Because there were no taxes, no health inspectors, and no labor laws, businesses thrived. The city was famous for its food factories. Hundreds of tiny workshops produced fish balls, noodles, and roasted meats that supplied the finest hotels and restaurants in Hong Kong. The irony was palpable. The five-star tourists were eating food prepared in the squalor of the walled city. Pigs were roasted on the floor next to open toilets. Fish balls were hand-rolled in windowless rooms. The city also became a hub for the plastics and textile industries. It was a hive of pure capitalism, unburdened by regulation. This economic grandeur was dirty, dangerous, and incredibly efficient, proving that the market finds a way, even in the darkest cracks of the city.
One of the most defining visual features of the walled city's perimeter was the wall of signs advertising dentists. Why dentists? In Hong Kong, dentistry was strictly regulated, but in the walled city, anyone could set up a clinic. Many of these dentists were talented professionals who had trained in mainland China, but whose qualifications were not recognized by the British colonial government. Unable to practice legally in Hong Kong, they set up shop in the walled city. Their rates were a fraction of the cost outside. Residents of Hong Kong would brave the dark alleys to get their teeth fixed or gold caps installed. The streets were lined with glass cabinets displaying bloody extracted teeth as testimonials. This medical tourism was a key part of the city's symbiosis with the outside world. It was a forbidden service industry that provided a vital function for the working class of Hong Kong.
For decades, the walled city was the undisputed territory of the triads, particularly the Sun Yat and 14K groups. In the 1950s and 60s, the Hong Kong police famously ventured inside only in large squads. The city was the center for opium dens, heroin divans, gambling parlors, and brothels. The eastern side of the city was particularly notorious. Here you could buy anything, hire a hitman, or disappear from the law. The triads acted as the de facto government, settling disputes, often violently, and organizing the volunteer fire brigade, since regular fire trucks couldn't fit in the alleys. However, by the 1970s, a series of massive police raids, numbering over 3,000 raids in a few years, broke the back of the triad power. By the 1980s, the city was surprisingly safe for residents, ruled less by gangsters and more by a mutual code of survival. The criminal grandeur faded, leaving behind a hard-working blue-collar community. For decades, the walled city was the undisputed territory of the triads, particularly the Sun Yat and 14K groups. In the 1950s and 60s, the Hong Kong police famously ventured inside only in large squads. The city was the center for opium dens, heroin divans, gambling parlors, and brothels. The eastern side of the city was particularly notorious. Here you could buy anything, hire a hitman, or disappear from the law. The triads acted as the de facto government, settling disputes, often violently, and organizing the volunteer fire brigade, since regular fire trucks couldn't fit in the alleys. However, by the 1970s, a series of massive police raids, numbering over 3,000 raids in a few years, broke the back of the triad power. By the 1980s, the city was surprisingly safe for residents, ruled less by gangsters and more by a mutual code of survival. The criminal grandeur faded, leaving behind a hard-working blue-collar community.
The infrastructure of the city was a miracle of improvisation. Since the government refused to provide electricity, as it would acknowledge the settlement's legitimacy, the residents simply stole it. They tapped into the main cables passing the city, creating a fire hazard so severe that it terrified city engineers. Eventually, in a pragmatic move, the electricity company agreed to install meters, accepting the reality of the situation. Water was another battle. The residents dug unauthorized wells hundreds of meters deep under the foundations to pump up groundwater. This water was salty and polluted, used for washing and toilets, while drinking water had to be carried from the standpipes. The city was a cyborg, half scavenged, half engineered. It demonstrated the architectural ingenuity of the poor, who could build a functioning city with nothing but wire, PVC pipe, and determination.
Despite the squalor, former residents often speak of the walled city with deep nostalgia. They describe a community spirit, kaifeng, that has vanished from modern Hong Kong. Because everyone lived in such tight quarters, often sharing kitchens and toilets, privacy was impossible, but loneliness was also impossible. If a mother was sick, the neighbor cooked for the children. If a thief entered, the whole floor chased him. The Kaifeng Association served as a welfare organization, providing schooling for children and burial services for the elderly. This social cohesion was the glue that kept the city from collapsing into total barbarism. The vanished grandeur was this intense human connection, forged in the crucible of extreme density. The fate of the walled city was sealed on January 14, 1987. The British and Chinese governments announced a mutual agreement to tear it down. The decision was driven by the impending handover of Hong Kong to China in 1997. Both governments wanted to remove this sore thumb, this embarrassment of colonial failure and Chinese neglect. The announcement came as a shock to the residents. For nearly a century, they had lived in the cracks of diplomacy. Now, diplomacy had closed the crack. The decision was a form of geopolitical prescription. The city was incompatible with the image of a modern, unified China. The eviction process was massive and painful. The Hong Kong government set aside HK $2.7 billion for compensation. But for many residents, money couldn't replace their livelihood. A dentist who made a fortune in the walled city couldn't get a license outside. A fishball maker couldn't afford the rent in a legal factory. The eviction destroyed the economic ecosystem of the community. Many elderly residents refused to leave, having lived their entire lives inside the walls. They were forcibly removed by riot police in the final days. The dismantling of the human network was more traumatic than the dismantling of the concrete. Just before the demolition, a group of Japanese architects and explorers gained permission to enter the deserted city and map it. They spent weeks measuring every corridor, every room, and every pipe. The result was a famous cross-section panorama, a minutely detailed drawing that reveals the incredible complexity of the hive. This document is the Rosetta Stone of the walled city. It shows how staircases wove through buildings, how rooms were subdivided into cages, and how the city functioned as a single machine. This act of documentation saved the architectural memory of the city, proving that it wasn't just chaos, but a complex, adaptive system. The physical demolition was not easy. The wrecking balls had to chew through buildings that were fused together. It took a year to flatten the site. As the walls came down, the dark interior was exposed to sunlight for the first time in decades. The city of darkness was bleached by the light. The rubble was not just concrete, it was the sediment of 50,000 lives. The demolition was a symbolic cleansing, a ritual to remove the cancer from the city's body. By April 1994, the site was a flat dirt lot. The anomaly was gone. Today, the site is occupied by the Kowloon Walled City Park. It is a beautiful, serene, traditional Chinese garden, modeled after the Jiangnan Gardens of the Qing Dynasty. It features pavilions, ponds, and perfectly manicured hedges. It is the absolute antithesis of what stood there before. It is clean, quiet, and regulated. The only remnant of the old city is the yamen, the original fort building, and a bronze model of the slum. The park is a lovely act of historical revisionism. It celebrates the distant imperial past, the fort, while completely erasing the immediate, lived past, the slum. It is a vanished grandeur replaced by a sanitized heritage. Although the physical city is gone, its ghost haunts pop culture. The walled city became the primary visual inspiration for the cyberpunk genre. You see it in the rain-slicked, dense streets of Blade Runner, the slums of Ghost in the Shell, and the narrows of Batman Begins. Video games like Stray and Call of Duty recreate its aesthetics. The walled city became the archetype of the dystopian future city. It proved that the high-tech, low-life aesthetic wasn't just fiction, it was a reality that existed in Hong Kong.
The cultural afterlife of the city is far larger than its physical footprint ever was.
Kowloon Walled City was a singular event in human history. It was a perfect storm of political neglect, refugee desperation, and Chinese ingenuity. It showed us the absolute limit of urban density. How many humans can be packed into a space before it explodes? It was a place of darkness, crime, and filth, but also of incredible resilience and community. Its destruction was inevitable in a world of laws and borders, but its existence proved that people can build their own world when the government looks away.
The destruction of the walled city was a victory for hygiene and law, but a loss for a certain kind of freedom. In the walled city, you could be anyone. You could build your house how you wanted. You could start a business with zero capital. It was the last frontier of the Wild East. The park that replaced it is beautiful, but it is a cage of rules. No cycling, no loud noise, keep off the grass. The vanished grandeur is the loss of that chaotic, dangerous, vibrant liberty.
We will likely never see another Kowloon Walled City. Modern building codes, surveillance, and state control make it impossible for such an organic structure to grow again. It remains a fascinating mirror to our modern planned cities. We strive for order, light, and space, but we often end up with isolation. The walled city had none of those things, yet it throbbed with a life force that our glass towers often lack. It reminds us that a city is not the buildings, it is the friction between the people inside them.
The Kowloon Walled City was a monument to human survival, a concrete hive that proved we can live anywhere, under any conditions. If you are mesmerized by this tour of the City of Darkness and the lost architecture of Anarchy, be sure to subscribe to Vanished Grandeur and hit the bell. Our next episode investigates a recent architectural tragedy in Japan, the Nakagin Capsule Tower, the failed future of plug-in living. We will explore the iconic Metabolism Tower in Tokyo, composed of 140 detachable concrete pods, designed to be replaced every 25 years, but never were. We will uncover why this masterpiece of modular living was allowed to rot and was finally demolished in 2022. What other buildings designed for the future failed to survive the present? Let us know in the comments.